Well, howdy. How we doing today? And well, I'm Matt Lebon. I am the assistant farm manager here at EarthDance Organic Farm School, and I am also a connoisseur of unusual and unique fruits, something that we are starting to delve into here at EarthDance. I would like to introduce Mr. Guy Ames here, one of our nation's foremost experts on organic fruit production. Welcome to EarthDance, Guy.
Thank you very much. I'm glad to be here.
You are so welcome. So, just to cover some of the basics, in talking about organic fruit production, what does it mean to grow organically to you in terms of fruit production, and why do we see such a lack of organic fruit coming out of the Midwest?
Okay, so to the general public and to me too, the first thing is just avoiding the use of chemical pesticides and fertilizers, and that's important. But you can't just do that without replacing them or figuring what you're going to do about pest control. And the reason there's not much coming out of the Midwest and the South where I'm from is because the disease and insect pressure is huge. And we have to remember too that the organic fruit that we find in the marketplace comes from mostly the Pacific Northwest, the eastern parts of the Pacific Northwest, which is essentially desert. So it's irrigated desert. And in the desert climate, the disease pressure is virtually nothing, and even the insects are few and far between. So it's just much more difficult here to grow organic fruit and have it look like the stuff that comes out of the West. And that's what Americans have become used to, is that.
Sure. So
it's really tough. Now, what it means to me to be organic is much more than just avoiding the use of chemical fertilizers and pesticides. It's seeing things integrated. And that's kind of what the word organic really means, is integrated. So we're using compost. You use compost here. You use wood chips from the municipality here of Ferguson. We try to find pest control methods that we can, produce here or employ here. They're not always a pesticide per se. They're going to be cultural controls. For instance, just choosing the right variety that's not susceptible to a certain disease or insect.
Yeah, so that's a really good segue into kind of my next question, which was, last night you taught a class with EarthDance on organic fruit production, and you spent kind of the whole second half talking about solutions that people have to addressing some of the difficulties that come with growing organic fruit here in the humid, moist Midwest. Could you touch on some of those?
Yeah, so again, first is just not doing the things the way we've always done them. And that sounds ridiculously simple, but a lot of it's hidden. So when people say, if I asked you a fruit, in your mind, what image pops up? I say, we're going to grow an orchard. Let's plant an orchard. And for most people, it's apples immediately, and maybe peaches for a few others. And those may or may not be the right choices. And in addition, the varieties that people are used to, the ones that they like at the grocery store, may not be at all the ones that really do well here, especially without pesticides. Does that answer part of your question?
Yeah. Well, you had mentioned, disease resistance and how we can, one step that we can make towards the correct choices is selecting for disease resistance.
Right. So if it's apple variety, the major apple diseases, we pretty much have them all here in the Midwest and the South. And so with apples, it's apple scab, powdery mildew, fire blight, cedar apple rust. There's this whole litany of woes that can attack your fruit trees. But let's go just a little bit further and maybe a little bit back and think about some other fruits altogether. The Native American pawpaw is a nutritionally rich fruit, and flavor is just unbelievable. It's essentially a tropical fruit. And it's very easy to grow here, the pawpaw is. Even deer don't like it, which is about the only thing I know that deer doesn't like. But very easy to grow, a beautiful tree in the landscape too, which is another thing about the organic lifestyle, is that why not include beauty in your food production? And, some of us are going to find rows and rows of trees beautiful, but frankly, I think it's much more beautiful and much healthier to mix it up, to diversify, and it makes pest control easier too. If you don't plant rows and rows of pears like they do in the Northwest, you can mix the pears up with the apples or with the pawpaws and the persimmons, and you get a lot of spontaneous, natural pest control that you'll never even see. You know, the pests, the diseases just can't easily hop from one thing to the other. You're not setting the table for the pests that way.
Right.
So some of the organic techniques for pest control are just deceptively simple.
Sure.
Like that.
Yeah. So that's awesome. You know, talking about the pawpaw, and which is an unusual fruit that is really ready for some commercial experimentation. Look, we can go take a look at some of the other stuff that we're messing around with in terms of unusual fruit.
Good.
So here we are in the front yard, and we're kind of got things landscaped out, a completely edible yard that you can eat yourself. We're looking here at a hedgerow of, well, Guy, you tell us what we have here and why this is an interesting crop.
Well, they're called Juneberries usually, but there's a lot of other common names. Serviceberry, Sarvisberry, my favorite's Chuckleberry.
Ooh.
Yeah, but they've been used for a long time as ornamentals, you know, especially in the eastern United States, to where they're native. And the thing that's really interesting is that all the while these things have been growing and beautifying the landscape, the berries are very good. They're very nutritional. They look like blueberries. To me, they taste even better because they have an almond aftertaste because of the little edible seed inside, and much easier to grow than blueberries. They're natives, they're nutritional, and they're easy to grow.
And they're resilient, right, to all kinds of soil conditions. Great.
Oh, yeah.
Let's look here at this one, another hedgerow of edible, super hardy plant. What do we have here, Guy?
It's a bush cherry, Nanking cherry, Manchurian cherry. They're all from China, these bush cherries, although there's a new stock coming out of Canada soon. But again, you know, sweet cherries especially, are very, very, very hard to grow in the Midwest because of disease pressure. But tart cherries and these bush cherries, thank you, are very easy to grow and delicious.
Let's head over.
All right, so here's a currant, and well, you can see the kind of abundance here. They're in the ribes family. Currants and gooseberries are both in the same family. And again, incredibly easy to grow. This was, well, it's in shade probably more than half the day.
Almost full shade.
Yeah. So there's another thing you can do then with this edible landscaping is there's some fruits that are going to flourish in the shade, some are going to flourish in full sun, and just using a little bit of knowledge, and some of it you can get that knowledge here at EarthDance. You can have that edible yard and organic. There's hardly anything easier to grow than some of these things.
So currently, we've got lots of currants.
All right, so here we have something we're probably all a little bit more familiar with. We've got strawberries coming in really early here in the year, and then we've got over here something a bit more novel. We have a Chicago hardy fig. Who would believe that we could actually grow figs here in the Midwest? But although a really cold winter might kill it down to the ground, it comes back every year for us. So this guy is really, we're excited to get some figs off of him this year. So here we are. We're looking at some of our tree fruits. Guy, we mentioned this one earlier. Introduce us.
Yeah. So this is the pawpaw again, and the reason that Matt and the farm here has it set up like this is it's naturally an understory plant in the woods. So it'll stay this way for just a year or two, and that'll help it get up to size, and then you'll take the shade away, and that will induce it to start fruiting. But this is just a really interesting plant. It's the only member of its family that doesn't live in the tropics. This is essentially a tropical fruit that can grow all the way to Canada. It's native all around Missouri. If you went down to the creek bottoms and river bottoms, you'd find it. But there's some improved varieties. It tastes like a mango crossed with a pineapple, with a banana. It's got protein, vitamins. It's just really an incredible plant. And like I said, it's relatively easy to grow. This is sort of an unusual thing, but you know, also it would tolerate considerable shade in your yard if you're just trying to do a little yard gardening. So it's great that way.
And then following this, Molly, we have a whole sequence of the many different unusuals that we're growing here on the farm. We've got our pawpaws next to each other here, but then we've got our disease-resistant pears, we got some disease-resistant apples, tart cherries, June berries. So we're kind of mixing it all together, following Guy's advice of mixing it up and trying to create diversity and break up some of those pest and disease cycles. All right, so Guy, we don't have a traditional orchard here. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about how we've integrated some 200 plus trees into our thriving vegetable and herb operation that we already have.
Right. So this is, if you think about the principles of agroecology, how does nature do it? Well, nature doesn't put row on top of row, tree on top of tree. Nature mixes it up, and that's what you've done here. And so you've got pawpaws, then apples, and then pears, and in between you've got annual crops that you can switch up, and then you've got another, some space, another one of these swales. The swale, by the way, is an excellent way to provide, the kind of drainage that you need for fruit trees, but also when you collect some water there, but not so much you're going to waterlog it. Anyway, it's just really a well-designed system, much more in harmony with nature than conventional commercial farming. It's really a good thing you're doing here.
All right, so here we are, Guy. This is the origin of all this fruit production. It started actually in the nursery. Tell us about how we got started in the nursery here and what the steps are.
Okay. Yeah, so this is the nursery, and even though we're farming in harmony with nature when we're doing it organically, it doesn't mean that we're going to leave everything up to nature, because nature includes a lot of pests and diseases, as we've already mentioned. And so we want to propagate the varieties that really have the pest and disease resistance that we require in an organic system when we don't want to use pesticides. So these are rootstocks. Every fruit tree is both a rootstock and the variety. So the rootstock is chosen for its pest and disease resistance as well as the top. And if we want it to be true to name, well, for instance, if you tried to plant seed from a Red Delicious, there's about a 1 in 10,000 chance you get something like Red Delicious. And you probably don't want Red Delicious. So what you do is you propagate clonally or asexually by using the wood itself. So I'd go to a tree, let's say Liberty, which is free from diseases, it's Liberty, and I would take a bud from that piece of wood and put it in here. And hey, there's one right there. There was a successful graft, and this looks like it's pristine. It's free. It's a rare yellow variety that's free of cedar apple rust. With all the cedars we have around here, that's a persistent and troublesome disease. So we've grafted it. Matt and the crew here grafted it, and now we're going to have a pristine tree. These are shoots from the rootstock that we can take off, but you got a new tree there that they made with just a little bit of help, a little bit of labor, and it will thrive in an organic system without pesticides.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Guy. It's been a pleasure having you out here, not only walking around the farm and talking trees and unusual fruit, but having you last night for our apprenticeship class that we had. And of course, we look forward to having you back, keeping you in the loop, and continually getting your expertise and your input on what we're doing out here.
Thank you. I'm impressed with what you're doing. Very excited about it.
Appreciate it. So, if folks are interested in learning more about what we're doing, check out earthdancefarms.org, and you can see a class listing there or any of our other community events.